research in cosmology to explain dark matter and dark energy in physics, and in physics to explain the nature of life, mind, consciousness, and matter. And he has developed a new physical model of the atom. He has written and will soon publish 2 new books, Fallacies in Physics, spelled F-Y-S-I-C-S, and 4 Pillars of Wisdom, the Conceptual Foundations of Natural Science. He has also opened a webpage featuring all his publications and presentations at www.neurocosmology.net. And actually, he's pretty freshly just back from speaking in Ireland. He speaks actually all over the world. He's spoken in Germany. We just found out that he and PMH Atwater met in Korea for the first time ever in all places. So he is just all over. Anyway, please help me welcome Dr. James Beichler.
We're about ready to undergo a big change of pace. I apologize. Well, at least it's 11 in the morning, not 9 in the morning or 8:30.
We can't hear you too well.
Okay, I'll speak up louder. Do you want me to blow you?
Don't mumble, Jim.
Oh, don't mumble.
Okay, this is the neurocosmological basis of consciousness and spirituality. This is the abstract. I guess get that. I don't need to read that. Discovering how and whether consciousness emerges in the brain has become an important and controversial subject over the past few decades, since 1990. And the question is, are mind and consciousness just epiphenomena? That means secondary phenomena, implies accidental phenomena, resulting from simple material interactions in the brain, electrical charges moving around, independent physical but non-material interactions in the brain, field phenomena in the brain, or something completely different that is completely beyond the ability of reductivist science to explain. I go for the middle option, physical but non-material, they're field phenomena. Now, answers to these questions could reveal clues about the source of spirituality, the source of spirituality and other aspects of mind and consciousness that seem, for all intents and purposes, to have no connection to the materialist, reductionist worldview of science. So a lot of people think it isn't even for science to do this. But science is going to do it anyhow. Science is doing it. Science is doing it without even trying to. Neurophysicists, neurophysiologists already have fMRIs read the minds of people. Believe it or not, they showed people a movie, and the fMRI plays the movie back, coming through the changes in the magnetic fields in the brain. So this is already being done, whether people say it can be done or not. Now, these answers, they can also tell us how we as individuals and species relate to the universe as a whole. What is our purpose here? It is at this point that physics and physical cosmology enter the study because it has traditionally been the physics that defines what physical material reality is. So this is the neurocosmology, how the mind, consciousness fit into the whole universe. To begin this study, we need to look at the neural correlates of consciousness, how thoughts arise in the neurons in the brain. The very place where thoughts and memories first occur, essentially where the individual mind and consciousness emerge in our brains from our material contact with the external world of our body and the external world outside of the body. I'm including both those as external. In essence, we think that we exist in our minds. We picture things in our minds. We picture ourselves in our minds. We think we exist in our brain. That is not necessarily true. That could just be an illusion. And in either case, whether it's true or not, how could it be so? How could we close our eyes and picture ourselves or someone else or think of a tune? How does that occur? Now, the smallest viable living unit is the cell. And the neuron is a particular cell associated with mind and brain. Also, of course, the whole nervous system. However, neurons extend throughout our bodies to make up the nervous system that carries signals from the external world to our brains, and from our brains back to the various muscles and organs in our body. So the nervous system made of neurons is more or less a mediator between us and the external world, whether the external world is the rest of our body or the world outside our body. Now, not only do neurons extend throughout the bodies, but they are disproportionately large in the heart. The heart has almost as many neurons as the brain, but their function's a little bit different, and they don't know the total functions of the heart. They think the brain controls the heart through the neurons, but about 80% of the neurons in the heart are unaccounted for. They don't know what they do. Now this is going to be important, as I'll show shortly. Only in the heart does the density of neurons approach that of the brain. If mind and consciousness emerge from vast nets of neurons in the brain, as all scientists think, then mind and consciousness must extend throughout the rest of the body as do neurons. So this is like a floor plan here. A minority of scientists thus associate mind and consciousness with the whole body of a living organism. I say it goes beyond the nervous system. Cells can have individual memories. Every cell in your body can have memory. Every cell in your body emits and absorbs on its own electromagnetic waves. That's been pretty well verified now. So the whole body is part of consciousness. And the whole body, all the cells in the body, are also part of mind. For this and other reasons, I've concluded the brain alone should no longer be considered the home of mind and consciousness in the body. The brain only seems to house the mind and consciousness because of the dense concentration of neurons in the brains and the manner in which they function as neural nets. Thus concentrating our primary awareness of consciousness in the brain. So our primary awareness of consciousness and mind are in the brain, but in reality they extend throughout the whole body. Aspects of mind that we usually associate with the material brain, have been detected in neural nets, which are groups of neurons in the brain which are connected with one another by the dendrites that exist at either end of the neurons. Now, human and higher levels of consciousness somehow emerge somewhere and sometime between the fundamental components that make up the neurons and the neural nets. So science has pretty much located the emergence of mind and consciousness between the neurons, the components that make them up, and the neural nets. The neural nets is where we see the first aspects of consciousness arise. And like computer technicians think of neural nets as logical circuits. And computer people, researchers are actually trying to copy the neural nets to make more efficient computers. Now this is neuron. This is basic structure neuron. This is okay. This is the cell nucleus. The cell. This is the cell body of the stoma. This is the axon. The axons can be very long. The whole cell has a membrane outside. And microtubules form the cytoskeleton. And then you have MAPs, or microtubule-associated proteins, connecting them together, the little lines here. Then these are dendrites coming off the soma, and at the end of every dendrite is a dendrite bulb that attaches to another neutron to pass electrical signals via neurotransmitters. Here's a better picture of the whole one. This shows the length, and you have dendrites at the end, down here at the other end of the exon, as well as coming off cell bodies. And it said that at the end of every dendrite there'd be bulbs to attach to other cells to pass signals, electrical signals. Now this axon can be very, very long. The longest axon in your body runs from your tailbone down to the tip of your toes. That's all axon, because the nervous system that goes to your feet, or the nerves that go to your feet, actually the heads are at the bottom of the spine. And that's called the sciatic nerve. And many of us, as we get older, know what the sciatic nerve is because it hurts like. So that's all the axons. Now this is a picture of a neural net. You can see here are the axons. Here are the soma, or the cell bodies. Here are the dendrites. And you see here barely where they are attaching from one neuron to other neurons. There's attachment. There's attachment. Those are the attachments. Then you have electrochemicals called neurotransmitters, carrying electrical signal from one neuron to another through neurotransmitter transmission. Now the key to the whole system is microtubule that makes up the cytoskeleton. Microtubules are actually biomagnetic induction coils that form individual nano-radio transceivers. Now, I'm the one that came up with this idea. If you know anything about consciousness studies, there's a model called the Hameroff-Penrose model, or the Orr model. That's a big popular one. They claim that it's all run on quantum mechanics and microtubules. But what they missed, and I predicted about 10 years ago, was that these are induction coils, magnetic induction coils, and when they fire in sequence, they build up strong magnetic fields within the microtubules. Well, they now know, they've discovered those strong magnetic fields within the microtubules. And of course, I don't get credit for it because I never published a paper on it. All they have is the abstract or the conferences I go to, so I won't get credit for that. A microtubule is a cylindrical tube made up of peanut-shaped tubulin proteins of 4 by 4 by 8 nanometers. That's really small. That have either the tubulin proteins exist in either an alpha, beta, positive or negative electrical state. This is round. This is the microtubule here, and these are little peanut-shaped tubulin proteins. They're 25 nanometers outer diameter, 17 nanometers inner diameter, and all the microtubules have the same configuration. The only difference is the length. They range from 100 nanometers, or a tenth of a micrometer, to 1 centimeter in length, the individual microtubules. It has a helical twist, so it's actually helical. A round cylinder, 3 nanometers per turn. Now that's important because that's how it's allowed to act as a magnetic inductor. Now you have the sequential firing order. When electrical signal comes up, they fire like this. So it'll go alpha, 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 like this, cylindrically around. Now, as the signal comes in, say if I step on a nail and the electrical signal goes up the axon from my toe up to the tail, up to my tailbone and onto my brain, an electrical signal called the action potential comes up. Ions go through the axon wall here, and they cause the inside to become negative, the outside to become positive. So this is a capacitor. This is well known. It's been known for 60 or 70 years now. Then it changes the electric field inside. Now the electric field inside makes these fire in sequence like this as the electrical field changes here. It's actually forcing them to fire in sequence. Now the Hameroff-Penrose model is that that's all a quantum sequence, and they can't explain why they fire in sequence. Well, it's easy. They're following electrical field change. And they're classical inductors. They're not quantum inductors. So this is an induction coil, north field, north field, north field, and so on. Then the signal passes, they ought to go relevant. But the thing is that between the capacitor cell wall and the microtubules, that is called an LRC circuit. And that is a basic tuning circuit for all radio transceivers, emitters and receivers. And that was invented by Sir Oliver Lodge. You know him, he was really big in the SPR. That's the basis. That is the basis of memory and everything else. It's the magnetic firing here in the sequence. So the microtubules emit electromagnetic waves in the forms of solitons, pulses. It's not a normal wave like this, just bam, 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 like that. It's not up and down, up and down. It's just up, 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 up to normal, up to normal, up to normal. So they're individual solitons. Now these soliton waves act as guides for memory storage and retrieval in 2 different ways. First of all, waves from the neighboring microtubules in the same axon they interfere with each other. So if I have 2 microtubules next to each other, they set up an interference pattern in the water molecules between the microtubules. Now that quantizes the nuclear magnetic resonance of the water molecules in a specific pattern. The pattern quantized in the nuclear magnetic resonance of the water molecules, of course, matches the ups and downs, the variations in the interference pattern. That is memory. Then that is actually stored, imprinted into the space-time continuum between the microtubules. Now these varying magnetic vector potential patterns quantize, well I just said that, quantize the nuclear magnetic dipoles of the water molecules in specific energy orientations that are imprinted into the space-time continuum. That creates memory and thought patterns. Now, when like if I look at you, and that stored the pattern, imprinted the pattern in my brain, I look again at you, a new signal comes up. That new signal coming up, it tries to store it in the water molecules, but it's already there, so I recognize you. This is recognition. Now, the recognition occurs through something called pattern matching. An incoming pattern matches one already stored. Now, it's these memories then that make up consciousness. All the memories together at first go for a slime mold. They're chaotic memories, but eventually they reach this complexity where they all start to fit together and make a complex pattern, recognizable pattern. That magnetic pattern is consciousness. Secondly, the emitted electromagnetic wave pulses from microtubules resonate synchronously with similar microtubules in other neurons, establishing magnetic field lines between neurons. And these act to guide the placement of dendrites for more efficient neural nets. We know now, they've only discovered within the last decade, that the nets change their shapes, their positions, by the dendrites coming up and going to new positions with new learning and new experience. In other words, we're constantly rewriting our brain, how we think. They don't know how that happens. I'm explaining how it happens. Because you have microtubule, one neuron, or a group of them here, a group of them there firing, and a different neuron. They're synchronous with each other. So they set up a stronger magnetic field between them. So a dendrite originally went, see, it matches these three firing with those three firing. That's an old dendrite connection. All of a sudden you get a new experience and it causes four to fire, so you have four down here. That sets up a stronger magnetic field here. So the electric pulse is coming down the dendrite through the neurotransmitters, so they go to a stronger magnetic field and set up a new location here. And that's how they change with experience. Very simple. Classical physics. Of course, everyone says classical physics can't explain this. They say it's impossible because they think in a quantum world. It's not quantum. Now, as already know, the dendrites change positions of different neurons and neural nets according to new experience of learning. It's a natural process in the brain. It's called brain plasticity. However, there's presently no theoretical model, except for this one to explain how it works. Now, altogether, there are four fundamental magnetic domains. Those are interacting levels that contribute to the emergence of consciousness in neural nets. Consciousness is the magnetic pattern. It is a magnetic vector potential pattern stored by the water molecules in the brain and elsewhere in the body. But it's a very complex pattern. It's not the overall magnetic field. It is the pattern. I can't stress that enough. And it's multi-level. The four lowest levels in the brain are the water molecules. That's the lowest level. These set up what are called magnetic domains. These are common. If you have just an iron bar magnet, every iron atom in that iron bar magnet is a little tiny magnet. They don't all line up going this way to make it north and south. A bunch of them line up this way, that's called domain. Another bunch line up here that way, another bunch line up that way. So you have domains, and you have domains and domains, domains and domains, and finally the bar magnet with north and south pole. This is very common physics. The second level coming up is microtubules, which act as classical magnetic inductors. They establish and guide the processes. Then the axons themselves, as the magnetic potential goes around, comes up the axon, actually forms a magnetic field around it, like any current carrying wire. Then finally, the neural net as a whole has its own magnetic field characteristics. So that's the first four-level domains in the brain. I'm only talking about the brain now. But the domain structure continues right up through the whole body. I mean, it'd be the same for a little skin cell down in my big toe, or a blood cell going through. They'll have their own domain structures that start from molecular and come up. To form a very complicated, multi-layered magnetic domain system, a pattern of complexities within complexities within complexities within complexities, and so on, that constitutes ever higher levels of consciousness. I don't know how many there are. There are somewhere between 25 and 2,000 levels, domain levels of magnetic fields in the body. It's beyond me to calculate. And they're all different. The neural nets could be different than a cell in my stomach wall. But these are all domain levels, so it's an extremely, unbelievably complex pattern of magnetic domains, and that's what is consciousness. Now, the heart has its own. Every organ, it comes up to the size of the organ, and every organ has its own magnetic field. The brain has its own magnetic field. It's a combination of all smaller. The heart does, your skin does, the bones do. Everything in your body has its own structure. The heart being the strongest. Now this is from heartmath.org. This shows the magnetic field of the whole body. This is magnetic field of the whole body right here. right here. This is either north or south pole, and then that would be the opposite one, like this. Of course, there'd be magnetic fields associated with your legs and arms too, but then they add to the overall whole. And you see, it's almost centered, just below the heart. Don't we have a chakra right about there? That's, you know, center. So this sort of also looks like chakras, doesn't it? You can sort of use this to imagine where chakras and chi comes from and everything. Here's the heart. It's the strongest, and then the brain. The heart is about 100,000 times stronger electrically and 5,000 times stronger magnetically than the brain. But the brain has levels of complexity, neural nets, that the heart doesn't. So it's the functioning in the brain that makes us think we're in the brain. It's those neural nets rather than our heart. Although some of us think we're in our heart too, I'm sure. However, the brain is far more magnetically complex than any other organ in the body. That's why we think we're there. We mistakenly think or imagine the mind, consciousness, and self are located in the brain. Now, overall, I propose that, and you would have gotten this off the previous talks in previous year. Life is a complex matter, energy, or quantized space-time curvature pattern matching the whole body. Mind is a complex electrical scalar potential pattern, imprinted over the life pattern. So life is matter and energy. The scalar potential pattern is electrical. Then the magnetic potential vector pattern is consciousness. That's because magnetism directs electrical charges. Electrical charges exist in the electrons and such, the material part. Life and mind are thus three-dimensional phenomena. They're three-dimensional material. But consciousness is a magnetic vector pattern extension of our material body. So consciousness is along the fourth direct, it's actually in the points of space that point, and our vectors have lengths in the fourth dimension of space. So life and mind are three-dimensional phenomena, and consciousness is a fourth or four-dimensional phenomena. Now, life and mind are the normal evolutionary products of the physical, I mean for specific individual organisms. Life and mind are the normal evolutionary products of the physical and material world, while consciousness is only physical because matter only exists in three-dimensional space. Matter itself does not extend into the higher dimension of space. So matter is three-dimensional and material, and consciousness is physical without being material. All things paranormal and spiritual can now be explained within the context of this model. In fact, the natural existence of paranormal phenomena is predicted by this model of life, mind, and consciousness, given the geometrical structure of four-dimensional space and five-dimensional space-time. Our commonly experienced three-dimensional space matter is internally double polar Riemannian. That's just Einstein's general relativity. The space-time curvature is double polar Riemannian. Now that means we can draw spheres that have a north and a south pole, or squares, or any object. I have a north and a south pole. Everything in three-dimensional space will have a north and south pole. Now the fact that our three-dimensional space has certain characteristics, like we can have mirror images, and we can do rotations, and we can do translations along lines. But every dimensionless geometric point in our space is physically, but non-materially, extended into the fourth dimension of space. All of these points come together, all the individual dimensionless points in three-dimensional space extend in the higher dimension. They all meet at a single point in four-dimensional space. So the higher dimension, fourth dimension, is single polar Riemannian, not double polar. That's why we cannot materially sense it. We can physically sense the higher dimension, the sixth sense. We cannot materially sense it through our five senses because it has a different geometry, different characteristics than normal space. Riemann would have called that, we live in an n-dimensional space, three-dimensional space, and every n-dimensional space requires the existence of an n, is embedded in a higher n plus one dimensional manifold. The fourth dimensional space is that four-dimensional manifold. This structure, and only this structure, structure guarantees our commonly experienced three-dimensional space has exactly the geometrical characteristics that we experience every day. The fact that we can have mirror images and do translations or motions, we have rotational motions and linear motions. That is guaranteed by this structure. But it also means that every dimensionless point in our commonly experienced space is simultaneously in direct contact with every other single point in the whole of all three-dimensional space. So every point, dimensionless three-dimensional point in my body is in contact with every point for every star in the universe right now, because they all come together in the fourth dimension at that point. Now, I did talks at IANS, International Association for Near-Death Experiencers, in Columbus a few years ago, and it was arranged by Nancy Dannison, who has a blog page and has written some books on NDEs. And when I told her this, she got really excited. She said, "That's the sweet point. I touched that. I know that. I saw that during my near-death experiences." And she called it sweet point. Well, here's geometrically, this is her sweet point. Everything comes together there. There is no time there, because we judge time by change in three-dimensional space. But if every point in three-dimensional space comes together in the fourth dimension at one point, there can be no change inside it. So there's literally no time in that point. Then time between three-dimensional space and that point becomes what Einstein would say dilated. So time in the fourth dimension is not the same. So time for consciousness is not the same as the physical time that we measure on clock in three-dimensional space. Now, the phenomenon, spirituality. This is a definition that I got out of Wikipedia. Spirituality is a transcendent dimension, they're using dimension differently here, within human experience, discovered in moments in which an individual questions the meaning of personal existence and attempts to place the self within a broader ontological context. Well, for one, I'm saying it's a dimension where everything comes together in a single point. Doesn't that sound like the geometry I just described? I define it a little bit differently. The concept of spirituality has recently been liberated from the stranglehold of established religions and is now thought of as an individual awareness of something more or greater than our commonly sensed world, commonly sensed through our five senses. But what is that something? What is spiritualism? Or spirituality and awareness of? Now, we could better say that spirituality is an undefined, intuitive knowledge of some special connection between each and every person and living being, as well as a connectivity between individuals and everything else in the universe. It's our consciousness acting through that sweet point, geometrical sweet point, single pole and single polar geometry. So if we can touch that, and this is the openness that we feel, this is compassion, this is the connection, love we feel with everything. So this is what people taught. In other words, spirituality is an intuitive and completely natural subconscious awareness of the four-dimensional point geometry structure required by normal three-dimensional space. Sorry to put in those terribly reductionist terms.
Leave that there for a while. Go back. Go back.
This will all be on the internet in a couple of weeks, and this is all in the essay I've written. And the whole essay, even though we're publishing it here, I'll have it on the internet in a couple of weeks. You'll have that address at the end of this.
Okay.
If you want to copy it, I've got a hard copy, and you can copy it from hard copy too. Now, our five normal senses perceive that material space is three-dimensional because our five senses evolved in three-dimensional space, so they can only access three-dimensionality, the material world, and governed by the natural sequence of changes that we call time, clock time. But our mind intuitively senses a higher being and becoming through the four-dimensional connections of consciousness. Being what we are, and of course becoming involving time, how we change over time, according to the fourth dimension, our consciousness. Under these conditions, the survival of conscious mind after death in the material body is all but guaranteed by present-day physics. Not any physics that I'm developing, but by good old Maxwell's laws of thermodynamics. These are Maxwell's four laws of thermodynamics. Monopoles are the material source of electricity, electrons. Dipoles are the source of the magnetic field, north and south pole. Dipoles, because north always goes to south, so you can't separate them. So the first two are three-dimensional material sources. The third one here, changing electrical field creates a magnetic field. That's a source of electromagnetic waves. That means if I take an electron, shake it like that at a frequency of 10 times per second, I'm going to emit a light wave, an electromagnetic wave, with a frequency of 10 times per second. The changing position electric field creates electromagnetic waves, magnetic field. That's also three-dimensional. You look at that one. Changing magnetic field causes the electrical field. The magnetic field, the vector potential that establishes the magnetic field in 3 dimensions. The vector potential is 4-dimensional. So this last one here deals with the 4th dimension. And that's not my idea. That was developed between 1870 and 1873 by William Kingman Clifford, who was actually quite well known in mathematics and physics. But nobody wanted to listen to him. Nobody wanted to listen to him. Here's my first doctoral dissertation subject. So that 4th law actually guarantees, because only the first 2 laws of Maxwell's 4 laws are affected by death. They're all about material 3-dimensional world. The 3-dimensional portions. Consciousness is 4-dimensional and thus unaffected by death. And as the magnetic field, 4-dimensional magnetic vector potential, varies at death and continues at death, it recreates mind, the electric field, as potential, not as electromagnetic waves, as potential. And that potential electromagnetic field interacts with the material world, it can cause light. But until it interacts with the material world, it uses no energy. It's like pre-energy, what comes before energy, the potential to make energy. And that's what survives. Consciousness is that complex potential vector pattern. Now, near-death experiences. Normal sensory access to the 3-dimensional world is cut off abruptly by death. Your 5 senses no longer take in information. Or near death, and the experiencer becomes momentarily aware of the 4-dimensional self that survives during the death time before being revived, brought back to life. And I can explain the characteristics of NDEs. I think I did that here 3 or 4 years ago. Mystical enlightenment occurs either spontaneously or through dedicated practice when a person directly experiences and becomes consciously aware of his or her 4th-dimensional self. In mystical enlightenment, like Buddhist enlightenment, the person actually consciously experiences that higher dimension. And what happens in both these cases is that's new experience, and if it's strong enough, it rewires the brain plasticity. And then the brain is able to do ESP and stuff like that, and becomes more aware of the connections with the rest of the world. And those are the characteristics of NDEs. Some of them, not all, but some of them. In both NDEs and mystical enlightenment, the brain is rewired at the neural net level. And the extent to which that occurs is proportional to the extent that the person remains aware of the experience after being revived or coming out of Sartori or whatever. So some people aren't going to remember NDEs, some will. The ones that have stronger recollections is going to rewire their brains more strongly because that's where the awareness comes from. Now, ghosts and apparitions are theoretically possible according to this. I'm not saying they exist, I'm just saying they're theoretically possible. They represent different ways in which the 4-dimensional magnetic potential pattern imprints of formerly living individuals manifests themselves within 3-dimensional space. You have 3 types of hauntings. You can have emotional imprints in the environment placed before death. If somebody's really anxious or fearful, they have so much energy in their body, it reaches a threshold, so it not only imprints memory in their body relative to the internally relative to their body, but also relative to the surrounding environment. Trees, rocks, and plant land. Gettysburg. Omaha Beach, where people 3 in the morning hear the guns and everything. That was so emotionally charged by the people, so anxiety, fear, and everything, so emotionally. They actually imprinted not only internally to the person in their consciousness, but externally. It became a threshold. The legionnaires marching off in York, England to war against the barbarian. That's those kind of hauntings. They're very easily explained. And John Sable talked with us last year about his investigations in Gettysburg. He's now putting this in his book. Type 2, a surviving consciousness pattern matches mentally with an individual and communicates ideas. You have the individual's pattern often the fourth dimension. A thought in that individual's pattern matches with your brain. If it comes to awareness, then you sense that person mentally or communicate with them. And the surviving consciousness pattern actually manifests as a body of light in three-dimensional space. That pattern in the fourth dimension actually interacts with the environment in a room and causes a shimmering light. And when different people see it, that's a ghost. What we say is a ghost. So I can explain all this. They're actually predicted by this model. Mediumship is theoretically possible. I'm not going to endorse any mediums. I'm just saying it's theoretically possible. It's similar to type 2 haunting above in that an individual would need to consciously pattern match thoughts with a surviving consciousness for the purpose of communicating ideas. But it's different than that. The brain of the communicator, the medium, must be pre-wired for the continuing occurrence of the communication. So somehow mediums are theoretically possible. I'm not saying any given medium, but they've somehow managed to rewire, or born with rewired brains that actually allow them to pattern match thoughts in a surviving consciousness with the patterns in their own brain. ESP, mental pattern matching of ideas, thoughts, emotions, etc. between individuals' consciousness and other individuals' consciousnesses. This is a continuous ongoing process in the background of consciousness. It goes on all the time. It just never comes to awareness. It's that prickly feeling you get in the back of your neck that Rupert Sheldrake talks when someone's staring at you, because it's coming to your awareness. Prickly feeling is just starting to come to your awareness, but you don't know what it is. But what happens? You still jerk around to see if anybody's there. You're not totally aware, you're only partially aware, but it's pattern matching with patterns in your brain and your body. Then, and in this case, the body is actually an antenna sticking. The four-dimensional body is like an antenna sticking in the fourth dimension, picking up all this stuff. PK, the active control of non-local material objects' internal magnetic characteristics at the atomic molecular level by establishing a pattern match between the sender's consciousness and the material object in question. If I build a magnetic field strong enough, and I step into the magnetic field that I build, it would realign all nuclear magnetic resonances, enough of them in the actual molecules and atoms in my body, that I would float against, be repelled by the Earth's magnetic field. I could float against gravity. I see it done with spiders and small things. That is how PK occurs, or poltergeist activity. Somehow, pattern matching with the object, changing the object's internal magnetic fields. It doesn't hurt the object, but it acts at the atomic molecular level to align the nuclear magnetic resonance to make it momentarily magnetized. And some people detect heat afterwards. Well, it causes heat because the molecules vibrate as they realign the field. Some people, after poltergeist activity, have felt the objects have moved, and sometimes they're hot. Well, that's because of the vibration of nuclear magnetic fields at the molecular level causing heat, internal heat. Healing, the purposeful consciousness control of the non-local living organisms' internal magnetic resonance pattern characteristics for the express purpose of inducing healthier life patterns by pattern matching between the sender's consciousness and the origin in question. Remote viewing and clairvoyance, bringing into conscious awareness the constant background pattern matching of specifically designated non-local objects or locations to gain data or information about them. Pre- and retrocognition, pattern matching between a person's consciousness and non-local events and times through the utilization of special and unique connection between time and the four-dimensional space at the single pole. Remember I said the single pole, time would not exist at the single pole because there is no change, because all points in space are in a single point. So there's no change. So time is totally different there. That's the source of precognition and retrocognition. The natural existence of all these phenomena is predicted by this model, life, mind, and consciousness, given the four-dimensional space of five-dimensional, sounds like double talk, I'm sorry, space-time geometry of the universe. It's all geometry of the universe as a whole, the dual geometry of the universe. So all paranormal phenomena are reduced to either actively or passively becoming aware of and utilizing the intuitive pattern matching that exists in your own consciousness and brain via the natural four-dimensional connection between all points in space. That's what we call psi. That's the definition of psi. However, this model also implies a new form of evolution that goes far beyond classical Darwinian natural selection and modern cellular, which is mutation genetic drift, which are bottom-up. Gaps in evolutionary record on life on Earth, such as the Cambrian explosion 200 million years ago, all the one-celled animals all of a sudden, boom, over a very short geological time became two-celled complex animals. They don't know why. It's called the Cambrian explosion. That suggests a form of top-down evolution, not bottom-up, Darwinian, or even modern cellular. This is Darwinian evolution. It goes wham, bang, boom, from a basic chemical reaction to life, body, mind, brain, and consciousness. Boom. But when you do this, consciousness is an epiphenomenon. It's just a secondary characteristic that comes along. If you go with Darwinian evolution, natural selection, or modern genetic through mutation, genetic drift. That's a very simple picture. This is what's really happening. You have basic chemical reactions. You form a chemical complexity, like a hurricane of chemicals. The hurricane develops from the chaotic nature of the weather system, and then it takes on its own characteristics afterwards. And the hurricane begins organizing all the weather around it. That's what a complexity is in chaos theory. So that first complexity is life. That's purely Darwinian. But then you have a functional complexity later forms. That's when first mind-brain comes. And then that organizes body and life, and then that organizes chemical reactions. This step right here, that's important. I'll come back to it in a minute. Then later on, you have memory complexities in lower organisms in the brain. Chaos in all the memories. They don't match. They start matching and forming patterns and patterns. Finally, form a complexity. And at that complexity, you have the first level of conscious awareness. All life has all three, the electric and magnetic patterns, but only in higher forms. They start getting higher. Are they forming complexities where we become aware of them? So then consciousness affecting mind, mind affecting life. That's top-down evolution, goes from bottom up through this organizational pattern right here. Once mind and consciousness have reached significantly higher levels of complexity, they continue to evolve independent of the lower chemical level of body life. After this point in time, when new levels of complexity emerge, within either mind or consciousness, they can reorganize, genetically reorganize for heredity, the lower levels of being, and thus initiate a new round of top-down evolutionary leaps. So that's what I've explained here. But now, the more you go towards consciousness, the harder it is for these basic chemical to follow Darwinian. It's become too complicated. Darwinian can't handle that. But at this first, for the chemical complexity, when it forms functional complexity, there's bifurcation, a splitting. And this is normal chaos theory. You can have a splitting when complexity forms. And split into two. One side is a functional complexity. That leads to brain and animals. But you can also have a form complexity. The complexity of form, that leads to plant life based on photosynthesis. So here's your animal kingdom and plant kingdom. This tells why you split. There can be other splits. One of the latest of the top-down are the formation of the large brain in humans. And we've just been filling in that brain. It happened between 80 and 150,000 years ago, that large brain. That was purely consciousness to mind to life. And since then, we've been filling in that brain. We are close to filling up that brain now because we have so much information, we've become so smart. That means that we're getting ready to jump in the next evolutionary leap. The structure of evolution implies a whole new theory of evolution, and this is based on physics, not biology, which require developing a more complete theory of thermodynamics, and this is what I talked about last year here. The new theory of thermodynamics added Prigoghine's principle, emergence of complexities from chaos due to outside influences, and then put these two together. Sorry, I don't have time to go into the detail, I'm just about out. Put these two together and you get the evolution of physical systems. Now all of a sudden, evolution and thermodynamics can explain the evolution of galaxies, the evolution of planets, the evolution of the whole universe. because everything evolves, not just living bodies. Now, more importantly, this all means that we're next to an evolutionary law. If you like equations, here are the neoclassical forces of nature, electromagnetism, and new gravity with a new term here, which explains dark energy, dark matter. And I put that in Einstein. Here's the final equation. It's just like Einstein's equation for curved space-time, but it is 5-dimensional and quantized. And from this equation, you get everything. With interpretation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Jim's got to do this whole thing again at,
3 minutes, okay.
he's got to do this whole thing again in Dearborn, Michigan to the Society for Scientific Exploration and cram it into 15 minutes. This is going to be fun.
What I'm going to do is cut out 3/4 of the slides, but I'll flip through them. I'll make all the ones I could do there, like blue color, then skip all the white ones, come back, and tell if they want to see the whole thing, they can watch that video.
I got a quick question for you. One of the movies that I love and you're not so in love with was What to Believe.
Was what?
What to Believe.
Oh, right, yeah.
Isaru Emoto in What to Believe. You know, since you talked about water, and that's the
Yeah.
difference between, you know, your model, I think, and the model of what's his name, from University of Hammeroff. So, in what Dr. Emoto did is he found out that you could store patterns of emotion actually in water, and you simply hold water close to you, and you you use certain words. You know, you can use good words or bad words, and when they took the water and formed ice crystals out of it, the bad emotions formed very ugly-looking crystals, whereas the ones like love and compassion and things like that formed, you know. So I just wondered, doesn't that connect with what you're talking about?
Yeah,
Those patterns, absolutely?
We're 70% water. Our brains are approximately 80% water. There's more water in our brains than other parts of our body. Now, the problem is with water is they don't know, there's water between the microtubules inside the axons and between the neurons in the brain. But inside the axon, they don't know the state of the water. Some people think it's liquid crystalline water, and until we find out the state of the water there, superconducting water, until we find out the state of the water there, I can't make a lot of calculations. I can make basic calculations using basic, you know, freshman college physics on the strength of magnetic fields and everything else. But I can't tell about the magnetization. Now, I came on the idea of the water and nuclear magnetic resonance of water when I ran across an article in Physics Today magazine about 2.5 years ago. I read that some German scientists were working with nano, that's a billionth of a Tesla, extremely weak, a million times weaker than the Earth's magnetic field, with nanomagnetic field's effects on water molecules, and how the quantum theory can no longer predict magnetic resonances of those with that small field, that they're coming up with anomalies. And that's what gave me the idea. I always wondered how what role the water played in this, and that's when it came to this model.
We got to cut it there, but we know now, I think, that water is more than just H2O. There's a lot more.
Yeah.
Karen's got an announcement, and then we're going to break for lunch, be back at 1
Thank
o'clock,
you.
but we'll just,
So, what-
1:15. Oh, we're going to take a little longer, okay. So here's the announcement.
I changed the time in order to give a bit more time over lunch for discussion. But some of you have asked where the bathrooms are, and